This might be the first time I actually break my own personal rules. Well, DBT11 is definitely both an interesting introduction to some of the new red lines, as well as considerably one of the worst boosters we have in a while, as there is almost no value in wrecking the booster in general.
Emotional damage!
But does the impact that this booster makes is very helpful to the meta? Well, that is what I'll be discussing today. So just like my previous tier list video, I will be following a certain set of rules in which some might be broken today. But here is essentially the rule mentioned by my past self. The first rule is there's no collab deck list in this tier list. This is due to the fact that I feel it's unfair to just represent the entire nation with just one deck list that keep topping in everywhere in the world. And also some collab nation does not come to the Japan or vice versa as well. Secondly, there is a limited option in the tier list for the higher one, namely S and A tier. This is for me to separate great deck from good deck, because let's be fair here, a lot of lower tier deck can beat the higher tier deck, but the main difference with those is that the quality of the support is very different. Some actually fix the issue and actually push the deck and beyond. Some actually just fix it but doesn't improve the deck beyond that. So for S tier, 3 and 3 only, and for A tier, 10 and 3 only. So last but not least, this is based purely on my experience as a card fighter. So I have play tested it through the stream, online, offline, and also I have played against those decks before. So the ranking I'm putting on this deck are based purely on my experience of those decks. So if you guys have a different experience for it, do leave down in the comments below and be very civil about it. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, consider clap the subscribe button, as it will help me tremendously. And before we get into it, actually, I feel like we have to put in the entry that I feel negligible to discuss in the today tier list, just to speed things up. So with the power of editing, the thing happenings right now. Let's start off with the orientation, just like the previous booster, and there are 6 decks to talk about. And this is gonna be one of the rules that I will be breaking, and that is talking about collab deck. Well, let's be real here, this particular collab is also an exception in itself for among the collab, being a part of a main nation, namely Stoicheia. So let's start off with the magazine promo first, since this is one is very easy to rank, and that is Claudine. And personally for me, Claudine is a B tier deck, like right here. The problem with Claudine, in my opinion, is that it has everything it's going for except power level. The intention of trying to nerf plant token is very clear with this boss in it, and unfortunately it also makes this deck kind of suffer from low restand power level as well. Yes, I do aware that Stoicheia do have cards like Leoga and the unicorn thingy that give more power to regards, but that's also a commitment that Claudine is not able to make at the moment. And I feel until the deck is capable of generating more resource, that Claudine will more or less will be at this tier for a long time. Well, this is also mainly due to the fact that plant token is a very fragile mechanic, in a sense that any good plant token unit tends to become very meta and very strong staple within the time it just released as well. So I can see why they are being careful about it, but unfortunately with the U-boss in it that looks very nice, it's have a very underwhelming effects and the playstyle at the moment. Moving on to the use Quake Rayland first, since it is in the entry. We have Shoutout, and this is where I'm gonna put him into like a low A tier, in which, so for those who don't know, A- became A became A+. So to me, Shoutout is a very solid deck out of the window. This is due to the fact that the deck capable of doing a lot of minor things very well, with multiple draws, multiple retires, very solid Vanguard swing, and respectable rearguard swing as well. The only problem with Shoutout, I would say, and for this kit it is a problem, is that it doesn't really have a proper win con other than just I have a big stick.
Nice.
And that's more or less the problem with Shoutout, with the DP playstyle that doesn't really have a lot of restriction overall, and its attack telegraph can be easily to telegraph is also a problem, especially for this deck because of how the deck doesn't really have a proper end game. So let's moving on to the other you quick right line first, and that is Luru's Rule, and this is unfortunately for me a very mid deck at the moment. The thing that it does, ability to reactivate card effects within the same turn, is actually really good, but I feel that at the moment the amount of the resource that it demands and the amount of resource it recovers doesn't really balance well, and also it seems to do a lot of things at once, but it doesn't really master at anything at all. Also, there's not enough Mystic unit at the moment, so this is one of the few cases where I have to say it needs more support. Like, I know that we have been getting a very good new deck recently, but I feel this is one of those decks where it would benefit more from getting more units that essentially play this to its own archetype. A little bit like Vyman Bruce, where it needed more Diablos unit that can do more advantage for the deck, and this is kind of like fall into the same boat as well. Now let's move on to the encounter right line, the new one of course. We have Vermilion and Ezel, and Vermilion for me is, this gonna surprise a lot of people, but I think he's a contender for high A tier, at least for me. This is due to the fact that his very unique way of dealing damage, as well as his way of controlling, allow him to shine in the format where power is everything, and it shined really well. And this is coming from someone who witnessed Vermilion was able to hit top 4 due to his ability to control the board really well. Yes, the player play a part into this, but I do feel that Vermilion being played well is actually very scary deck, as it allows you to control resource while, you know, dishing out damage. So even if you let it hit or you don't let it hit, you still can more or less take damage from this deck, which can be a little bit annoying if you are playing a deck that doesn't have a strong hand size, like Rush deck for example. And I feel that Vermilion just straight up murder these decks. That's why I have to put it in the high A tier. The only reason I don't want it to put above that is because Vermilion is still primarily a 3 attack deck. Even if it is capable of going into multi-attack thanks to Rising, it still has some rough patches needed to be fixed, even if it is capable of countering almost every single deck in the higher tier.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Moving on to Ezel, I have to put Ezel still in like a A tier, but I will put him in like on the lower side, so maybe somewhere around like 60 to 70 percentile, which is on the lower side. And the reason behind that is because of the fact that he does what he does as a Gold Paladin deck very well, but I do feel that he's reliant on a high power attack regard is the same issue that Solarion has. But the reason why Ezel is doing better job at this is because his deck is solely focused on superior calling, unlike Solarion where it's a half superior calling and deck manipulation. So the fact that he specializes in one job actually makes his deck a lot better. And let's be real here, I do feel that a lot of people sleep on Ezel a lot. The only drawback, and I think this is mainly due to the fact that there are at least 3 decks in the format right now that are well known for being able to counter the field presence. Even if Ezel can recover the field presence very quickly, it still requires resource. So overall, I have to say Ezel just got cucked by the current meta of the format. Okay, we have the last new deck, and the controversial one for some people because it's a collab deck. But I do have to raise my point here. It is a part of Stoic here deck, and I feel like it is fair to cover this right line compared to the other collab right line, which has its own nation. So let's talk about Mushy King. And this is gonna weird a lot of you guys out. It's actually good.
Nani?
This is what I tell a lot of people about Mushy King. It is like if you put Eva into a Stoic here, but kind of nerf some of the aspect to it so that it won't be as broken as Eva, and that is what Mushy King is. Its filter capability is really good, and each of the skill cards are actually pretty damn useful at boosting attacks without the need of personal right, and that's where this deck has a lot of strong potential coming from. The only drawback I would have to say for this deck is the fact that you are running a lot of bricks, namely the skill units, but fortunately there are more than enough resource in Slovakia to actually fix all these problems that the deck actually has. So overall, I have to say this deck is actually one of those decks where it is hard to predict because there are at least 9 ways to build Mushi King deck. And it is definitely one of those decks where, as much as it is made as a joke, it is actually very strong if you know what to do with it and you know what generic Stoichia support to put into this deck. The only sad thing about Mushi King is that this is most likely the only support that Mushi King will get. So if over time the deck get power crap, there won't be any new card to come in and save it. So that's kind of sad in its own right.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Now let's move on to deck that did get additional support for the past 2 months. And yes, I'm gonna be including face collection as well, starting off with Tamayura. And Tamayura, in my opinion, always has a problem of not enough resource. The deck requires so much resource for the greater version of the deck that it became really hard to utilize everything that you needed, resulting in quite a subpar multi-attack that can be shut down easily by a 1 or 2 defensive. But with her new version, I have to say, it is getting a lot better. I will put her in like high A as well. Whip's Tamayura is actually really good in the sense that it allows you to set up regardless of what situation you are in. If you are running on low on rear guards but you have enough soul to play the Grade 3 Fox R that allows you to summon back Ririmi and Rarami. If you want to play a little bit defensive or you want to go really hard on the offense, get your Grade 2 Fox Order to minus 10k to the opponent front row. Or if you still need some setup, you can just search for Broken Toy from deck or drop zone to get additional draw and soul. So what Willow is introduced into Tamayura as a deck is essentially a lot of quality of life that the deck has been needing it for the longest time. And not only that, it's the fact that its multi-attack now cost free means that you actually can take full advantage of the Grade 1's Ririmi and Rarami, allowing your attack to hit at a much better number. And not only that, because of the way Tamayura Grade, the original effects work, you actually still keep all this advantage while still having that additional 5k boost from the original Tamayura. So some of you might wonder, why am I putting her in high A then if her support is so good? Well, it kind of just boils down to the fact that she is not the only one that get great support, and after considering every single deck that got supported since DBT10, she is definitely high up there, but not the highest. Moving to the last, technically 2 decks that did get support for Dragon Empire, we have Shoujo Doji and Megalonosuji with all the new stealth support. And for Shoujo Doji, I have to say, it's getting an improvement from, I see tier if I remember correctly, to, I would say like mid to high B. The reason for this is because all the support that Shoujo did get is essentially playing around with his ability to bind card from the opponent circle. And let's be real here, Jakumetsu Arc kind of became irrelevant after this support, but I think it is for the better of this particular deck, as the deck is capable of recycle card back from bind zone while still capable of essentially dish out same amount of power level that it's already capable of while still gaining more resource.
Synergy.
And I think that is a biggest takeaway for Shoujo Doji. The only reason why I'm putting him not any higher than B is because he is still very intensive resource despite the new support actually fixed his resource issue. In my opinion, I feel it is a much better support for Megalonosuji, and it is a first deck to go into A+ tier for this tier list. Damn! And the reason behind it is because Megalonosuji has already a ridiculous amount of offensiveness thanks to cards like Unprecedented and his ability to filter the deck to an extent that you can filter everything out until you do not have anything but triggers by the end of turn 3 or turn 4, depends on the way how long you can last with this deck. And because of all the new support that give you additional draw and also essentially kind of like control a little bit better, it makes this deck even more disgusting. And I feel like the only reason why there's not a lot of representation right now is just it is being a magazine promo deck, and it is currently very hard to find this card in the market right now. Moving on into Dark States, and I will have to say among the 5 nations in DBT11, Dark State is kind of the weakest among the bunch, in the sense that Dark State has been suffering from the issue that the generic support doesn't really encompass the whole Dark State as a nation, but rather one of the playstyle that they usually focus on. So starting off with Chaos, we have a deck that I would say gets a lot better in terms of offense, and that's about it.
Disappointed!
Okay, to be fair, Agamanat is a great early game card as well as a late game card, while Oratrio is a very powerful turn 4 glass cannon card. But that is the keyword that I have to say here. Turn 4. Chaos has always have a bad hand size for quite a long time already due to the commitment you have to put, and because of that, a lot of times Chaos player either die on turn 3 or die after turn 4, because that's when they can put their base game on before completely just fizzle out. And the new support really play hard into that kind of playstyle for Chaos, which is not a bad thing. It makes finishing the opponent actually scary now, and thanks to the fact that there are more generic cards that every single deck can use, like the blue OT, is actually make Chaos an A tier deck again, mid to low A tier to be precise. Moving to the next deck, we have Greedon, and Greedon in my opinion is also in the A tier, mid to low A tier as well. And the reason behind my willingness to shift him up really high is due to the fact that Greedon must sacrifice quite a bit of himself, but it does open up to almost every single generic support that has been released, both in the past and the more recent version of it. And that's something I feel that we shouldn't overlook, despite, you know, half of his support has been shut down just because he is no longer the original Greedon. But I'm gonna be talking more about it in my upcoming mask video, so for now, let's just put it this way. He sacrificed a lot, his deck improved, but there are some aspects he got improved, and it kind of balanced out. Then we move on to last, but in my honest opinion, not least, the support for Dark States, and that is Luquia. And I'll put her in like the same tier as Chaos and Greedon, with her being the best among the 3. This is because the 2 cards that she did get, Jovial Juggler and Steam Maiden Talk, I think that's the way you pronounce her, really improve upon her deck, but at the same time sabotage her playstyle that is already solid to begin with as well. So both Jovial and Talk are great cards to run in a deck. Jovial allow you to have Rising at full power before you even attack the first time. Talk allow you to search your grade 3 order as well as other grade 3 cards you're willing to put in your deck, allowing Luquia to have a little bit more flexibility in the decks and also a lot of deck thinning and shuffling. The problem with these 2 cards that it's not really obvious at the first glance is the fact that it broke the synergy that Luquia has with Falcate. So for those who don't know, some of the more common combo for Luquia is you use the order, you Soul Blast with Ursete out, any grade 3, and then when Luquia attack, you put back the order, then you use the order effect to put Ursete in to call out most likely Rising. And that was the combo that the original Luquia has, and I feel that Talk and Jovial kind of break that balance. But to be fair here, Falcate is a good card but was poorly designed, as is designed to last for like 2 to 3 booster only. So to be fair, Luquia did get a support, but it does loses its original way of playing, and I feel that is something that were deducted from its mark from the tier list, and that's why it always perpetually being in the A tier, because as they improve the deck, they introduce more problem into it. Okay, let's move on from the depression that was Dark States into a delight for all the Keter players. We already have a solid deck which is Azel, but what does the other deck that did get the support do for against, you know, all these decks? Well, we have Tigria, which I will have to say is one of the deck at the top of A tier. This is boiled down to a few reasons. For one, this is the first deck that is capable of going into multiple personal right in one turn and like a legit personal right. And second, it is one of the first few decks that can go personal right regardless of whether you're going first or second. The only drawback that Tegria has, that some of the Tegria player did mention to me before, is the fact that it is very tight. Because you are running multiple grade 3s and multiple grade 2s, this means that your shield value is a little bit unstable. Fortunately, Tegria did get a few good support such as the dragon that helps you search for set order, Pepe in general, which is a great card, and I would say Tegria turns from very powerful rush deck into a disgustingly powerful rush deck. The only reason I'm not putting her into A+ tier is kind of the fact that as much as there is a card that helps you search for set order already, you are still running a ridiculous amount of grade 3 in the deck. So if you are unlucky and you keep filtering out your grade 2 instead of grade 3s, you will run into a situation where you cannot really make a play at all. And based on my testing as well as testing with a few of my friends, that result kind of shows quite heavily. And that's why she's kind of short of being in the A plus tier. But the deck that doesn't fall off from the tier though is definitely Minerva. Minerva get two cards in particular that really make her really powerful now, and that is her new support grade 1 from the DBT 11 and the PR card. Saisas is essentially a card that helps you to set up Chamomile and Melissa into your soul by filtering the Genesis card from deck and recycling it back from drop zone into soul. It also helps to open up a rear guard circle, ensuring that you can call Chamomile without the need of calling over a rear guard, which can be a wasteful action. Lyrilim also doing something similar in a sense that she gave you a free draw, whilst still guarantee that you get one Genesis card and a bunch of soul before Minerva attack, guaranteeing that the Minerva will always restand. One of the problems that Minerva did have was the fact that sometimes you cannot use the restand effect consistently, and these two cards essentially fix that issue like it was nothing. Because of that, I'm willing to keep her in the A+ tier, in the sense that yes, the power level is not as high as it needed to be, but the fact that she can go into at least 8 attack a lot more consistently now is just disgusting and deserve to be in the A+ tier. Then we move on to not really my least favorite, but rather very irritating nation to talk about, Vanguard, because the deck just keep getting better and better and better. We have to start off with everybody's favorite researcher girl, Eva, and in my opinion, it is still one of the best decks in the format right now. But I will have to say, she is no longer in the first place. And the reason behind that is mainly two things. For one, she now has a proper counter against her playstyle, and that is Vermilion. And secondly, DBT11 support focused more heavily towards improving the flow of her deck while still reducing the cost of the activation in the form of Poison in Paradise, which does weaken her filter game but does improve greatly on her offense, as all the effects are essentially free now, and Obscure can be called from drop zone with Poison as well. So because of that, you more or less you always have full attack with Eva as long as you can Persona right into Poison in Paradise. And the fact that Poison in Paradise doesn't require any counterblast also means that opponent can't really damage deny you or essentially damage block you from activating the effects anymore. And yes, those aspects is kind of avoidable for a while already thanks to the grade 1 research, but now that this card exists, you don't really have to feed those into soul anymore in case of you are not able to set multiple orders onto your order zone. And that is kind of a problem with Eva right now. To me, I feel Eva is more towards sustain your offensive board throughout the game, and that was the reason why she has been relevant in the meta for close to a year already. But now that the meta has started shifted towards high power level and burst turn, she's definitely start to show some weakness. She's still in the S tier for me, but she's definitely dropped off from being the best deck in my opinion for the format, and someone else kind of take into position of that. Moving on to the other researcher, Archites, and this is a redo, so I completely forget to take Archite out, but that is where I'm willing to put her into high A. This is due to the fact that she did get more monster to play around, but I feel that she lacks a way to really pressure. The only thing she has right now is high attack pressure, even better than ever. But the thing is that the power is nothing if you cannot utilize it through things like guard restrict or critical. And because of that, she's kind of like got holded back by this aspect of it, and I can see that Bushiro seems to be very scared giving a monster that can gain a crit or some kind of this effect due to the fact that, well, it's a very strong engine as long as you can put in research. Then we move on to the last deck that got supported, Messiah, and I forget to put in Jet, so I'm gonna be putting him in this entry as well. So for Messiah, in my opinion, I will put him at the top of A+ tier, so at the first one, and Jet will be following after. So to me, these two decks are kind of interchangeable, but I'm willing to put Messiah before Jet at the moment, mainly due to the fact that Jet is currently held back by a restriction list, while Messiah still can leave everything hanging. And not only that, the new Messiah support are actually useful for the deck, whereas for Chrono Jet, the support is good, but it's a little bit dependent on the matchup, and also its skill seems to be gearing more towards Vanguard centric Pale Moon Nest kind of effect. So because of that, I going to be ranking Messiah higher. It's still the same thing that I have said before, high power multi-attack and draws a lot. And the new card essentially give more power to fix some of the lower power column while still giving soul. So because of that, I'm willing to put Messiah higher and Chrono Jet right after. Okay, we already finished with Blanket, so let's move on to the last nation of DBT11, and that is Stoicheia. And we have two decks to talk about today, and that is Rorowa and Maelstrom. So starting off with Rorowa, is, in my opinion, is what Chaos aspire to be, a very powerful burst turn 4 deck that can actually live until turn 4 and actually swing at a ridiculous amount of number, so I have to put Rorowa into high A tier. This is, in my opinion, a deck that can potentially be in the top usage pie chart in the upcoming DBT11 and WGP, in my opinion, due to the fact that the deck always has a good rear guard pressure with Momoke and Ready Linas. Now Vanguard has pressure as well in the form of critical, and not only that, it does generate 2 W token S kind of effect, allowing you to gain more resource before you actually go into your burst turn, preparing yourself for the essentially one turn kill. And let's be real here, Rorowa is one of those decks where it can take advantage of over trigger into a disgusting level, and with the new support, it actually makes all these things matters now. The only drawback I would have to say with Rorowa, and the reason why I'm not putting him into A+ tier despite all the praise, is it is turn 4. In the meta where a lot of decks can burst by turn 3, he is definitely got holded back by being turn 4 focus unit, unlike Tegria. But to me, I think Rorowa has a much better impact compared to Tegria as a finisher. Okay, let's move on to Maelstrom, and I'm gonna put him in high A actually, like just below Tamara, because Tamara feels a bit more consistent. Maelstrom has get 2 new cards, and that is the set order searcher for him and the card that take advantage of those set order while still can swap rear guard position. Maelstrom has always been good with managing the field to have like a multi-attack while still swinging at a great number without actually cause arm and legs like Flagberg. And to me, Flagberg has always been a better deck due to a much better payoff when it comes to the skill. But I feel that now Maelstrom has reached the point where it's capable of deal so many attacks in one turn that all these huge benefits doesn't matter anymore, because it can just dish out multiple attacks. And during the DBT10 ranking as well as DBT9, I didn't really take into account of High Tide Dragon and how irritating it can get in rush-based Stoicheia decks. And because of that reason alone, I'm willing to push Maelstrom into high A tier and dropping Flagberg right behind him. The problem with Flagberg in the current meta to me is the fact that he is extremely prone to control, and with at least 3 decks in the top that is capable of control very consistently, Flagberg definitely suffers a lot. Initially, I thought DBT09 support will help to fix that issue a bit, but now that there are way too many decks that can reach a huge number while still capable of retiring regards, I think Flagberg is no longer safe. Moving on from the main booster to our face booster, we have DSS05, and for this particular entry, I'll be focusing on the 5 relical decks that did get the biggest support and some of the grade 4 decks that did get a huge boost from the ragdoll. So let's start off with the relical decks with our favorite cat, Loronero. And in my honest opinion, Loronero definitely gets an improvement. I'll put her into one of the top A tier. This is due to the fact that all the support that she got is either fixing the problem she already has or improving the flow of the deck, or at least help to filter out the deck a lot better than it used to be. You have the new Roro, which essentially call one card out and allow you to sing a card for free, which is actually great, and it doesn't really require a heavy activation skill. Then we have Mariro, which essentially search for song cards, which is something that I said a lot in my tier list video that it is one of her bottlenecks, and she's also a good beater. And then last but not least, we get the grade 1 that essentially search for Loro in general. So all this card put together makes the deck a lot less punishing to play against damage deny. On the other hand, the deck also has a much better rearguard board thanks to Mariru and a lot of like heavy swing and everything.
Synergy.
The only problem I would have to say the deck still have is the fact that you have to write back into the original Roro to essentially take advantage of that double swing effects so that you can actually swing for the biggest number. In other words, it is still a turn 4 base deck, but it can do their own things on turn 3 already, which is actually not the end of the world. Moving on to Clarissa, and let's just state out of her problem first, and that is lack of Earth Connect unit that can utilize the skill, so the order is harder to activate. And with the new support, we get 2 additional Earth Connect. If you're not including the Clarissa self, then that's total of 3. With all that considered, I will put Clarissa into somewhere around here. Here's the thing about this deck. The support that was given to Clarissa allow her to actually make Earth Connect board much better, in a sense that it allows you to activate the order much easier because of the additional name to it, and it also helps you to search for the main order a lot easier thanks to the new Clarissa. And the skill essentially is a lot more flexible now. The only problem I have to say with her deck is just that it's rearguard dependent. Even if the fact that you can recover quite well, you're still putting a lot of resource in, and Clarissa still suffer from counter blast, so it still can be damage denied. But I have to admit it's ridiculous amount of power level that she can reach, so I will have to put her into somewhere of an A tier. Okay, moving on to Alestial, and this is hard for me to judge because it is one of my favorite decks to play. I have the deck in real life and have played tested it throughout. I have to say it is getting better, but like it's barely playable right now. So to put it in perspective first, the problem with Alestial to me is that out of the 5 decks that did get the support, she is the only one that does have a dot support, and that's her Blackwing card. But to me, the other 2 are actually quite a playmaker for the deck already. Seraphiel allow you to essentially recycle Alestial back to deck, allowing you to go into Pesanara consistently, which does play into the new version of Alestial, which allow you to not only superior call Blackwing unit from your deck, it also help you to rewrite into the original card mid battle phase. So it's kind of like a raging form situation going on here. And this is where it gets interesting, because that rewrite activate L-Kill effects if you have her on the board. And thanks to the new PR, it does help you to clear off any other extra bind card you have in the bind zone, just in case you are screwing yourself up thanks to the multiple L-Kill effects. And that is where her problem kind of lies. The fact that they have to come up with a card to fix the fuckery that they decided to introduce into the deck. And because of that, I willing to push Celestial up because it's actually become better, but it's definitely one of those decks where it can fall off from the tier at any moment if there's a stronger deck introduced into the format. Then we have Villistar, and let's be real here, Villistar is currently one of the top. Here's a reason why I'm saying it's one of the top deck. This deck is capable easily of adding cards to hand up to 10 cards in one turn without heavy resource requirement. This is thanks to the new Villistar allowing you to superior call 2 cards for essentially free, and the new gem card essentially allow you to go into good amount of multiple attacks. And with other support for the gems as well as some of the generic support that you have, you can essentially have 5 attack decks that can draw a lot with very little cost, while still can bounce back cards up to 4 rare cards in total, and it can also return the OT back to deck thanks to cards like Ophelia. And because of the fact that it does superior call, it can take advantage of cards that has to be superior call like in grid as well. So with all this factor included, you have quite a cancer deck to actually play because it's so easy to generate resolve with this deck now. With the only weakness that if you cannot activate the gem or you cannot Persona Right, you are definitely got holded back. And when I say Persona Right, I mean literally just Persona Right from the card, not using the card, because of the ability to just straight up search for a gem card. And with all factor combined, I still treated it as one of the best deck because, you know, that is very minor holdback thanks to the fact that there are cards like Trixie to essentially help you to fetch for Villistar if you need to. Then we move on to the last lyrical deck from the DSS05, and that is Felty Rosa. And this is one of those decks I have to put it in high A, but not like the highest. So I'm just gonna put it like above Million because it's one of those decks that can get away from it. Okay, the problem with Felty Rosa in my opinion is just boil it down to the base playstyle, and that is the fact that you have to superior call lots of cards to activate the skill. But the thing is that all the ghost cards that belong to her archetype is actually really good, so that kind of counterbalance a bit. And her newer version also helps to make the rear guard hit harder while still allow you to generate a lot of resource and can utilize Villistar engine at the start of the game as well. So with all these factors combined, this deck can have a very good hand size, but because of the fact that just like Celestial, it does heavily rely on RNG, it definitely got holded back down just a little bit to me. It is not like the end of the world, but I feel that Felty Rose is like roughly up there with the Loro in terms of the power level, but I do feel Loro is a stronger deck due to her ability to guarantee to finish the opponent. Now let's move on to the deck that can take advantage of Ragdoll. Okay, before anything, I am fully aware that there are 2 Grade 4 decks that's already up there. I do feel that for these 2 decks, Ragdoll doesn't really affect the deck performance in any way or another, so it doesn't make it better or it doesn't make it worse. But for me, the other Grade 4 decks in this tier list can kind of make some use. Actually, PARRY doesn't really make a lot of difference, so I'm just gonna put her to somewhere that I did put it in the last video, so somewhere in the middle. So let's start off with the 3 decks that actually matters now. We have Nirvana. Nirvana did get more than just Ragdoll, but also the set order, which essentially help you to get free draws or help to recover Trickstar if your opponent trying to bind or essentially just retire the cross overdress or overdress unit. And to me, I think Maha still going strong actually. Maha is still one of those decks where it still hold up even after all this time as 108 wrong.
One eternity later.
He is still a very strong deck. Like, it's one of those decks that as long as you can last until turn 4, the deck power gets ridiculous, and this is one of those. Though I do have to say it is, compared to Jiva or Nirvana, the Chicken Nirvana, it doesn't take advantage of the new set order as much as it is, as well as the Ragdoll as well. That's why I'm putting it like in the middle. Okay, then moving on to Magnolia first, since it is one of those decks that can take advantage well, thanks to the fact that Inlet exists, and it did get an Amelia's kind of card in the form of the Great True that help you to ride into Elder if you're going second. And I feel that because of that, Elder is, or Magnolia in general, I feel is becoming a lot better in that aspect due to the fact that it can generate board and draws very consistently now, and a lot of cards in Magnolia can self-retire or put it themselves somewhere else by the end of turn, so it helped to avoid retiring and also Vermilion effect as well. Then we have Bastion, which I would say in similar realm of like power level now, thanks to the fact that Bastion currently is the one that can recycle the Bastion back to soul and countercharge, and that essentially helps the deck to recover from some of the heavy cost of the Great 3 unit that you do run in the deck. And not only that, it does allow you to go a little bit more ham on the soul, which essentially means that you can use cards like PARRY a little bit more heavily, allowing you to go into more draws, and also means that you can play your defensive game a little bit better. And I don't have to talk about Ragdoll, right? I mean, this deck running at least 20 Great 3s in the deck, so playing Ragdoll essentially means that you can search for either Bastion Prime to hand, or essentially just call any 2 Great 3 that you needed the most onto the field. Okay, so I have filtered down a few more deck entry that I feel like doesn't need a proper discussion, but these are the one that I feel like I still want to talk about it for this video. So let's start off chronologically with Overlord, and Overlord in my opinion is still one of the strongest decks in the format due to its Vanguard centric playstyle, so it does not really scare whether you get control or not, though the deck definitely starts seeing some fall off because of the fact that Elder Hatchet wasn't as much of useful as a card as much as a lot of people think it is, as it's mostly going second kind of cards. But it is still one of the very solid deck in the format that, like, if you bring into the WGP, no one's gonna question you because it is still one of the strongest deck around. Next up we have Jiva, and the more we have played against Jiva, the more I feel the deck's, I wouldn't call it lack offense, but the deck became harder to fight against due to the fact that the support has been very lacking. Even with the new set order help to recover the hand size, it is still not enough, and I feel that he is definitely slightly drop off from like high A tier that I put in the DBT10. I'll put him down to like here. The deck is still strong in its own right, it's just that when you are fighting in the meta that is having a much higher power, the amount of resource you have to spend to cross Overdress and do all the shenanigans seems like a joke, especially for this deck. And it's kind of sad to see it because this is the Overdress main character deck. Bushiroad, why do you hate Yu so much, man? Like, seriously. Okay, next up we have Drajewel, and this is one of those decks where I mispredicted the power level of it back in the DBT10, but as I predicted at the same time as well, it fall off very quickly.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
So in the honor to meet in the middle, I'm willing to put Drajewel into high A tier, just somewhere here. This is due to the fact that its burst on turn 3 going second is very strong. Like, it's hard for you to recover from that unless you pull multiple defensive after the Drajewel attack, which normally you try to avoid. So overall, I would have to say this deck definitely got better in terms of burst damage, and the deck can kind of sustain enough to do it at least one more time in the next turn. So at the end of the day, it is not end of the world for Drajewel as much as I thought in the last time, but it also kind of emphasized the need for Empusa in this deck. So depends on your deck list the gradual can be a high A to a high B. So, and that's how much impact Medusa does have to the deck in general. Okay, next up we have Hexa Orb, and last time I put Hexa Orb behind the Ludician Ariel and all, but I'm willing to put it up actually as one of the best deck in the format right now. It just kind of boils down to the fact that with my deck list, I am not playing enough resource card in the deck, so I'm not feeling the amount of draws and power that the deck can get in short period of time. But it just boils down to simple fact of, if you build it right, you are getting a good burst of damage with Hexa Orb, and with the amount of hand size it can get, I have to say this deck definitely getting better, especially with Sarges included, as she is one of the best users for Sarges in the format right now. And to put it simply, just build your deck right lah. Just build your deck right. Okay, next up we have Useberg, and I would have to say Useberg is definitely one of the deck that got weakened, but I don't think it's the weakest deck. Like the deck's consistency still can fight over the deck that is in like a high A tier right now. So with all that considered, I will put it harshly to like bottom of the tier. I think Useberg is a little bit worse than Megalonosuchi at the moment, because Megalonosuchi can generate a lot of resource already, and the same goes can be said to Velstra actually. I do still think it is one of the solid deck to put into the tournament. Power Mana is still very scary thing, especially we can do it like bit by bit, unlike gradual with one reset and everything. And the deck draw power is still there. Like Vestra is just still good as a deck. It's just that it got overshadowed by the current meta format, which is, like I said, high powered. Then we have MLB, and this is more to what my personal experience with the deck, because I encounter someone who actually teach me, or more like show me how to play MLB properly, and that is through multiple Emmeline. And because of how consistent double Emmeline column can get ridiculously high for this deck, I'm willing to put MLB up quite high actually, because of the fact that it is one of those decks where it is a Kita deck, so it got heavily pushed up by its support as well, generic support I mean. So because of that, it's gonna jump up beside this deck lah. I'll put it like above Buff Sakura. That's how much I see MLB in the new light. It is not the best deck in the format right now, due to its still main problem of needing a specific cards, 2 of them to be precise, to actually play the board. And the deck also constantly asks you to use cards like Emmeline and Cordelia to essentially facilitate all these ridiculous combos. Next up, Office. No change at the moment. I'm not gonna judge Office until the new support comes, so with the new trial deck as well as the BT12, with Office Mask being more or less a mascot for that booster, I'm not gonna judge heavily for this deck at the moment, but I will have to say the deck is pretty solid as it is for now, though it does run into thin resource issue, but with the newer support it's more or less helped to fix that issue already with some of the cards I have seen. But let's wait and see until DBT12 has been fully released, and let's judge the deck from there. Then we have Gravidia, and Gravidia of course is drop off lah. It is one of those that still can run from behind kind of thing. As the OG high power deck, it's definitely lacking, and partially due to how Bushiro slowed down the support as well. So I do feel until Gravidia getting a proper support, I won't see it improving anytime soon. And let's be real, I got a feeling this is one of the units that will be getting a mask aside from Office. So let's wait and see. Then next up we have Zorga, and Zorga is here lah. So I make a high praise about Zorga in my previous tier list, and I'm still hold on to my argument in that aspect. But, and this is a big but, I didn't expect it to be that good. Because it essentially, let's be real, Sokka feels like a discount Eva right now, but can actually burst on turn 3 unlike Eva. So to me, Sokka already get a good improvement, but I didn't anticipate how good of a burst damage mask deck can get. Then we have the last deck that is mask for this tier list, and that is Lion Mask, and I'll put Lion Mask like in above Mushi King, in a sense that if you have all the right cards for Lion Mask, it burst is game ending. That's how strong the burst for this deck can get. But the deck problem also is that it does need quite a few pieces to actually play through. Fortunately, the deck can kind of recover that to an extent. So the main card that you have to have for Lion by the time you mask into her is Tight Line. If you don't have Tight Line, the deck is fucked. Just put it straight and forward. But the fact that the deck can burst for a one-turn kill is something I have to give it respect for. Then we move on to Michu, and well, Gandiva format. So I'm gonna put her down hard a bit, because it is one of those decks where, yeah, you technically will always have 2 Vanguard attack, but thanks to Vermilion now, her power level drops significantly. Like, really hard for me to put her here lah. That's how I feel Michu kind of didn't age well over time. But again, she is one of those decks that haven't get supported in close to a year already. So let's wait and see if she's getting an update or not. Then we have Grifo, and I'm willing to put Grifo into the top B tier this time. This is because of, and this is more or less an average with myriads of different builds you can play Grifo. This is just simply because of that Blitz order, and that Blitz order essentially fixed all the issue that Grifo used to have, as it is kind of prone to damage deny because you have to generate Dragon Tree markers to actually reap some benefit from this card skill, but at the same time you also get a solid shield that can play around it. And not only that, more and more generic cards has been added to each of the nation, and it allows you to have more freedom building Grifo Killa in general. Then we have the last 2 decks in the format. I'll start with Grand Fear first because it is an easy one to talk about, and that is its drop to B tier, high B. The main problem of this deck kind of boils down to 2 things. For one, you are pushing all the resource into one single card, which can be retired by your opponents. So because of the fact that you have to delegate all the resource into one single point, it actually do more harm than good, especially in this format for Grand Fear. So to me, it's just that Grand Fear playstyle just didn't age well in the current meta with a loss of control. Then we have come to the last entry of this decks, this tier list, and we have Gandiva. And if you guys know my rule, it's obvious where it is going, S tier. But is it better than Vilista? I'm gonna consider it weaker because of the fact that Gandiva effects kind of start from his Vanguard effects, and if his Vanguard effect with, he is considerably holded back, and Base Howard is a reactive card as well. So if your opponent do not have a lot of cards on the field, the amount that you can draw that turn is not that much. And that is my tier list. Surprisingly enough for me, there is not a lot of bad decks in the format, like the deck that heavily needs something to crop up the playstyle. Like a lot of decks in A tier are pretty good, and they do have a weakness here and there, but it is not a kind of weakness that affect the playstyle, with the exception of a few, but you know, those are burst decks. But yeah, what do you guys think of this tier list? If you feel that I'm cramping too much deck into A tier, do say in the comments, because I do feel there's a lot of deck in the A tier, so I might make some cleanup in the DBT12 after that. But yeah, that's all I have for today, guys. Take care of yourself, and this is McMegane signing out.